Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another mixed bag of wrestling. Now this is a video response to the Off the Rope shows. Who would you put on your Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling? I was very intrigued about when I first read the title. And the stepdaddy talked very eloquent about it. Talking about Lou Thesz and Andre the Giant, just those two alone. I can understand when he put it on his Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. Those are greats right there. Now my Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling is going to be with, he put it as 5. I'm putting mine as 6. 6 people but I believe should be on my Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. The first person I thought of that should be there would be Stu Hart. Stu Hart, who started early in the 20th century, around 1920, 1910, in freestyle wrestling. By the 1970s, the man was already nearing 80. And he was still teaching not only his kids, his grandkids, his great-grandkids, but other wrestlers in the business. Starting up Stampede Wrestling, he did a fabulous job. Fabulous job. A lot of great people, and a few that we're not too happy about, came out of Stu Hart's dungeon. You can really say he did a great job. And for me personally, that is the person I believe should be the first person on my Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. Now the next 2 people I'm going to mention are not men. I believe this Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling should not be completely about just the same gender. I know these ladies should be in their own Mount Rushmore, but I believe that this is better, because if the current Mount Rushmore had only 3 people on it, and eventually they're going to add more, one, they'll have to add Barack Obama, no matter if you like the man or not. If Hillary Clinton runs and wins, she would have to be placed on it as well. Not saying they'll do that right now. But these are the 2 women that I believe should be on the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. Mine. First one, the best one, Mae Young. Doesn't make a difference how you think this woman who's in her almost 90s should even be walking and doing anything in the wrestling business. Much of the wrestling business is dedicated to Mae Young. She is. Without Mae Young, we wouldn't have as much. Well, see it like this. The Divas and the Knockouts are not doing well because of bad management. Let's be honest. The way both promotions have been managing them suck. But before the promotions screwed up on them, we're talking about TNA and WWE, the Divas or women in WWE and the Knockouts in TNA were actually doing a very good job. They were very intriguing. People liked them, not just because they had a nice pair of tits and ass. They gave them good storylines. They allowed them to do some very good wrestling, not just smash mouth wrestling, but actual very good finesse wrestling and high flying wrestling. Look at Lita. Look at Trish Stratus. Look at, you can say whatever you want, Angelina Love was a good one. Look at Karma, or as we know as Awesome Kong. That is how much influence Mae Young has given to the wrestling business. She did good as a wrestler. Eventually, I understand that at one point or another, she actually managed. So she deserves to be on my Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. The other one, I'm sure you probably figured it, Fabulous Moolah. I grew up remembering Fabulous Moolah, thought that she was one damn good-looking woman. I was just a kid at the time. That's when she started showing her age, and she started getting a little heavy, but it didn't make a difference. Fabulous Moolah was Fabulous Moolah. No one could ever take anything away from her. In her own right, she deserves to be on Mount Rushmore. My Mount Rushmore. She faced Mae Young more than a few times over the years. Fabulous Moolah is one of the few women in history that has won more than a few women's titles and held it longer than any woman in existence. She held one of the titles for almost like 8 years, I believe. No different from Bruno Sammartino or Mr. Bob Backlund. This is a woman who held the title longer than almost any woman known. She deserves to be here. If anyone thinks that the Fabulous Moolah does not deserve it to be on our Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling, leave a comment below, and I will be shocked if you do. The bad point. I'll be glad if you actually do it either way, but how can you not think the Fabulous Moolah deserves to be there? She deserves it. Now, that is 3 people on my Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. Here's number 4. I thought about this very carefully. Who would be the best person next? Who has contributed the most and has been seen the most and had the most impact on our professional wrestling world? The Slick Daddy had it right. Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant isn't just the biggest man in history. He isn't just the most seen man in history. He was one hell of a good performer. He was good in the ring. He taught people in the ring. And as I said in my debate of the week, Andre versus Big Show, Andre really, look, put it like this. During the time he was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, before he finally reached the point where he had to stop wrestling by the early 90s, he was still growing physically. His body couldn't handle the growth by the 1990s and late 80s. He literally was falling apart. But during that, this man, who by the time it was maybe 15, was already 6'5", was able to handle the pain and stress of continual growth. This man never really griped about anything. He was a kind, understanding man. He was very respectful. To the Ultimate Warrior, he wasn't that respectful. He finally smacked the living hell out of that man because he was getting on his nerves. I saw his video about how Andre was, and I saw some of the matches where he smacked the crap out of the Ultimate Warrior and taught his ass a lesson. Shame it didn't hit him a little harder, because I can understand the Ultimate Warrior, some of his points, but he has acted a little bit out of his mind. Let's put it like that. He's acted very eccentric, especially changing his real name to the Ultimate, to the Warrior. But anyway, really, Andre the Giant deserves it. Andre deserves this position. He really deserves his own monument. But for me, putting him with these 3 people, Stu Hart, Mae Young, and Fabulous Moolah, deserves to be there. He's that great. Now that's number 4, ladies and gentlemen. This was very difficult for number 5. I mean, I could have mentioned a lot of people that are current. I can mention people that are a bit far back. But the person I have to mention is the person I said from the very beginning that I remember seeing, and that's Mr. Bob Backlund. I know that many people would say, wait a minute, why are you putting Bob Backlund there? He's not that great. Yes, he was. Look, he was expected not to do great from the promotion that he was in the 70s. And when he was brought into the WWF, he had the title for 6 years. He ran with it, and people loved him, respected him, and he did well. Went into the 80s, went away for a while, came back in the 90s, faced the person that many people was considered one of the best shooters in wrestling, which was Bret Hart. I'm not saying that he was. It was just he was considered. Not saying he was a great talker, but he was a great wrestler. He was like with Teddy Roosevelt. Talk softly and carry a big stick. That, in a sense, is how Bret Hart was. Not saying he didn't do politicking, ladies and gentlemen. I know that man did. He did what he could to get his ass over. But it doesn't mean that he was always a big talker on screen. That's how it was. But working with Mr. Bob Backlund, he showed greatness. Mr. Bob Backlund, to me, since he was the one I remember the most vividly as a child, I do remember seeing Hulk Hogan. I do remember seeing Superstar Billy Graham, seeing Harley Race. But the person I remember the clearest has always been and always will be the man with the cross-faced chicken wing, baby. It's going to be Mr. Bob Backlund. Now, finally, the person that will be on my Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. The last person. I thought about this very carefully. Who would be the best person to put as the last member there? It's been very hard. I mean, there's so many people out there. I could say Chief PMI Villa. He was very influential. Carlos Colon, very influential. He gave so much to the business, especially when it came to Spanish. Gory Guerrero. These are just people I could name. There's so many of them. But there's one person that I had to think about that is the best person to put on my list was Paul Ellering. Fabulous Paul. I know people will say, wait a minute, isn't he he was a manager? Yes. He was a wrestler at one point. He did pretty good as a wrestler, but he transitioned over to being a manager, and he managed the greatest tag team in history. Well, I take that back. One of the greatest tag teams in history that rivaled the only one else that I believe that deserves the most respect. I may actually do a tag team of Mount Rushmore eventually, if I remember this. But the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, they were one of the greatest tag teams in history. There's very few that even come close. The Briscoe brothers is another one. And you can say whatever you want. The Dudleys, they're another one. They're considered, those are to me, are the three best tag teams that I could think of. There are plenty others. The Killer Bees was good. The Rockers were good. You got Strike Force was good. The Hart Foundation are good. But those three were good. And Paul Ellering, Fabulous Paul, baby. Fabulous Paul, baby. He was the one who made sure that his Road Warriors stayed on course and beat the shit out of everybody that they had, baby. Had to say pretty much, oof. You know, Dusty Rhodes had to be mentioned in this because it's the best way to close it. Paul Ellering, to me, yes, he wasn't a great wrestler. He was good, but he wasn't great. But he did what very few wrestlers can do. Not all can be managers. Not all. Bobby the Brain Heenan was a wrestler at one point, but not that great. As far as I know. I could be wrong about Bobby. If I am, please leave a comment below. But Paul Ellering was a great manager. And he managed to one of the greatest teams in history. He did. And I believe Paul Ellering deserves to be there, not just because he was a good wrestler, but he was a great, great manager and deserves to be on my Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. Now, I hope you like this mixed bag of wrestling, ladies and gentlemen. Subscribe and comment to ZANE'S View. Leave me a comment below. Tell me what you believe. Just like the Off the Rope Show says, everyone has a Mount Rushmore professional wrestling. It's up to you to find out which one that you saw as a kid or is now seeing as a kid is the best. Yeah, if you're someone who's young between 18 to 30, you're going to be mentioning people that's in the Attitude Era or someone who's in the PG. Probably someone's going to mention John Cena. It's not the point. It doesn't matter if we like the person or not. It's what you like. And I like to know this. I definitely would like to know. Leave in a comment below because I don't get that many comments. I want to hear what you say. So I hope to see you soon. And my next debate of the week should be up in a couple of days. And hopefully you'll like it. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen.